Good morning and welcome to the second meeting of the Education, Children and Young People Committee in 2026. The first item on our agenda this morning is consideration of subordinate legislation, the Education Scotland Act 2025, Consequential Provisions Regulations 2025. The instrument is being considered under the negative procedure. Do members have any comments to make about this instrument? Nope. Is the committee agreed that it does not wish to make any recommendations in relation to this instrument? That is agreed. Our next item of business today is an evidence session on Scotland's Rural College. And can I welcome Gary Ross, National Officer for Higher Education EIS, Johnny Hall, Deputy Chief Executive Officer and Director of Policy at the National Farmers Union Scotland, Professor Wayne Powell, Principal and Chief Executive SRUC, and Jeroen van Herk, Unison Steward SRUC. Welcome to you all this morning, and we'll just get straight into questions. Can I ask you all, and I'm going to start with you, Mr Hall, if I can, as probably the most seasoned committee witness in front of us today. What should Scotland's Rural College deliver, and is it delivering?
That's a very open question, if I may say, Convener. Yes, I am experienced at giving evidence to various parliamentary committees, but this, I think, is the first time I've given evidence to this particular committee. So I'll just put that down as my sort of get-out clause at the start. Nevertheless, I think it's absolutely clear to us as NFU Scotland, and indeed the wider agricultural industry, that we need an effective operating SRUC and all the provision and services it provides. It's not just a provider of education, but it also has that all those innovative and research aspects to its portfolio as well. And it also provides a significant amount of policy research that fuels not only government thinking, but our thinking as well, and that of many other stakeholders. It would be difficult to envisage life in an agricultural context or a wider rural land-based context without an institution such as SRUC. Now, we can all sit back and reflect and think, well, we need to improve it and make it work better, but we can say that about ourselves all the time too. So nevertheless, I think it's important that we do consider the role of SRUC. How do we make it the best it can be so that it can deliver the outcomes that the industry wants? And I'm looking at purely from the industry's point of view. And I think we're not far away, but clearly there are always improvements to be made. And some of those improvements and how we get there, I suspect we'll discuss this morning. In terms of the longer-term funding and the investment required, in order to ensure that we feel like we have that pipeline not only of skilled and able younger people coming through the education system, but also that innovation, research, technology transfer, knowledge exchange, advisory services, etc., which is so critical to the industry itself, to the farming and crofting community, if the farming and crofting community are going to deliver on what it's being increasingly asked to do so in terms of high-quality food production, tackling climate change, delivering on nature restoration, and probably above all, in many, many ways, underpinning our rural communities. So I think it's very relevant and very appropriate that this committee is considering how best SRUC can move forward and what funding, etc., it will need in order to deliver the outcomes and the outputs that the industry requires.
Mr Ross, the same question to you.
Thanks very much, Convener. Yeah, I mean, along the similar lines as my colleague, SRUC plays a vital role across Scotland with regards to its natural economy. From an educational standpoint, however, EIS has always had concerns regarding the merger of 3 FE colleges and the SAC and a distinct shift towards higher education and omitting further education. I think there is a bedrock of further education is required across SRUC, and I think that is being eroded. You can't move students across into a higher education setting without giving them the proper foundations to do that. And SRUC is in a distinct position to be able to afford FE provision across the natural economy. There are very little, if any, other FE colleges who have as a diverse a portfolio in FE curriculum as SRUC. With that being said as well, there are local impacts on these cuts to certain campuses across SRUC, Elmwood being the biggest. we are distinctly concerned around the fact being that there seems to be a real shift in SRUC's movement towards a higher education institution and leaving behind its FE obligations. So yeah, it is distinct. It does require to be adequately funded. And I think everybody would agree it was welcome that the additional funding that came from the Scottish budget yesterday into the universities and the colleges is really welcome. But as I said, we don't want to see the higher education element of SRUC overriding the further education provision that it should be providing.
Thank you. Mr Van Herk.
I've been working for a couple of years now in SRUC, and I've engaged a lot with our membership as well before coming to this meeting. I think SRUC, I totally agree, it's a very beautiful institution. We do often surveys with students. Students absolutely love the teaching they receive. They love the staff as well. We have very high satisfaction rates in these regions. But there are also significant problems in SRUC, and it very much has to do with the financial situation that we're in. But we also need to not beat around the bush. Like, a lot of these issues are also caused by high risks that are being taken by the management in SRUC, and that's certainly the view that has been reflected to me over and over time when I've been speaking to our membership. There are significant concerns regarding finances, but again, there's also a lot of things taking place, such as the way it went about with getting international students. There are areas such as problems if it comes to catering, problems to the incredible backlog of repairs, like £70 million. And again, so there are quite a lot of issues, but our problem that we see is that we feel there is quite a focus at the moment in Crapeston on HE, and there's a lot of focus on it in Edinburgh as well, but I feel there is, or our membership feels there's quite a lot of focus on two campuses, Edinburgh and Crapeston, but the rest of the other campuses, there's a bit of a neglect there. And again, the very good example, as Gavros mentioned, is Elmwood. What happened there, the situation was absolutely appalling to the students, but also to staff. And as I believe Willie Rennie, who I spoke previous about this as well, in the past, Elmwood was a very flourishing campus. There, many courses were oversubscribed as well, and now the campus building is boarded up, and it's just a very sad situation.
Thank you, Professor Powell. The same question to you first of all. What should Scotland's Rural College deliver, and is it delivering? And then we'll pick up on some of the points from the other witnesses.
Good morning, Convener. I'm not as experienced as Johnny in terms of giving evidence, but it's my third time in Parliament since the new year. So I'd like to start off by acknowledging the fact that everyone around this table recognises the significance of SRUC as a national asset. The second point I want to make is the importance of SRUC as an independent organisation that can provide independent evidence to support some of the areas that Mr Hall from the NFUS has referred to, including, I think, the inheritance tax changes that were initiated recently, which is fundamental to the farming community and the rural communities. What have we delivered? Well, if I may, Convener, I'll start with a couple of examples of that, because I think it paints a picture of an organisation that is delivering as ambition and as an ambition for the future, which is perfectly aligned to the to Scotland's ambition. The first is that SRUC provides more business support to SMEs than any other college or university in the UK, and that is largely down to the knowledge exchange programme that we provide at SRUC. We've also been the first organisation in 15 years to obtain taught degree awarding powers. So this has completely and utterly transformed the educational delivery of SRUC and the delivery of rural skills within Scotland. For the first time, we have a progression system from FE to HE with the same regulations under the same organisations. And we've got some wonderful examples in this booklet and the link that we shared with the committee that illustrates that transition. So the first time we have students who can, learners who can progress from SCQF, Scottish Qualification Framework level 4 to 12, and to come and go and enter in that in an agile manner. We've also completely revamped the Next Generation Agriculture programme with input from industry to support the delivery of both FE and HE delivery. So at the foundation level, we have our students spending between 5 to 10 hours per week on farms. So we have an FE and an HE integrated programme, which is at the heart of our ambition as a tertiary organisation within SIUC, delivering on the genesis of the formation of SIUC, which was creating a coherent delivery of rural skills across Scotland in an effective and efficient manner. We've also created Scotland's first vet school, the first vet school, a tertiary vet school in 150 years. We've attracted investment from the UKRI and elsewhere to develop the first digital dairy chain in Scotland to support regional economic development. We've won 3 Queen Elizabeth Prizes, and today there'll be an announcement that SIUC is only one university or college in the UK that's been selected to develop transatlantic relationships with the US to celebrate 250 years of the independence of the US. So this is an institution that is delivering. Recognise we can do more, but we've a track record of delivery and we're ready here to give further evidence to support that.
Do you accept that very rosy picture you're painting is not reflected perhaps out with some of the senior managers of SRUC? For example, yesterday we had a delegation of young farmers in Parliament on the Cultivating Leaders programme. And I told them that you were in front of us today and I asked them for their views on SRUC. And it wasn't very positive. And I say this as someone who studied at SRUC. I was at the Auchincruive campus for 4 years, very proud to have gone there and the education that I got at Auchincruive. But people in that delegation who are currently at SRUC were not particularly positive about the experience they're having. They feel there is a big shift in terms of interest from yourself and the management to the vet school at the detriment of other courses. And indeed, they said that many of their peers are considering going out with Scotland to study agriculture or rural business management elsewhere. Do you hear these concerns, not just at this committee, but outside this room? Have you heard these criticisms?
So, very happy to receive that feedback, content to receive that feedback. I'm a little bit surprised.
Sorry, Professor Powell, just 1 second. That's a strange answer. You're content that our next generation of farmers and those in the farming industry are raising serious concerns, so much so that their peers are considering leaving Scotland to study agriculture. And you, as the principal of SRUC, are content to hear that?
Kavina, I appreciate the feedback. I appreciate the feedback you're giving me. What I want to come on and say is that the group that you're referring to is going to be visiting our beef and sheep unit within the next few weeks, and we'll be exploring the work that we're doing at that beef and sheep unit, which is at the cutting edge of methane capture and the future of beef and sheep farming. So, I believe that we are making tremendous progress. I also believe that we are getting the balance between FE delivery and HE delivery right. If we look at the total number of students, Scottish domicile students, we have 2,600 students that are funded through the Scottish, through SFC, 43% of which are FE. That balance of FE and HE is the same, has been consistent over a number of years, and we intend to keep that balance.
Some SRUC courses being disrupted to protect the veterinary medicine course. For example, yesterday, young farmers were telling us on the rural business management course, almost on a weekly basis, they are having lectures cancelled because their lecturers are being drawn away to support the veterinary medicine programme. Do you recognise that?
I think that I don't have that information in front of me. I've not received that information. I'm happy to come back to the committee with further information if it's required. What I would say is that the vet medicine programme has been welcomed by members of this committee, has been welcomed by the Minister, and I think is filling a major gap in terms of what the rural communities need. It's also an outstanding example of social mobility and widening access, and it is delivering on what Scotland needs. So I am in no doubt at all about the validity of our vet medicine programme and the delivery of that vet medicine programme. I'm happy to come back to you, Convener, on some of the comments you refer to in relation to the specifics. I don't have that. I'm not aware of it, but I'm happy to follow up on that.
Okay, thank you. We heard from some of the other witnesses that some of the work of SRUC is being hampered in some ways by, and I quote, high-risk decisions taken by the management. Do you recognise that?
The decisions that are taken on academic matters at SRUC are taken by the academic board. We have an academic board which is composed of many members of staff across all our campuses, and all decisions on an academic matter are taken through the academic board. They are not taken exclusively and in isolation by the senior leadership team.
Come on, Professor Powell. I mean, are you telling me that the direction that SRUC has gone in the last few years is contrary to your vision for it?
Excuse me, could you repeat that?
Are you trying to suggest that the direction SRUC has taken in recent years is different to the direction you would take as principal because it's done by an academic body within SRUC? Surely...
At all, I'm saying that we have clear direction. We have clear direction in which we are going, but decisions on academic matters, which I think is the basis of your question in terms of courses, delivery of courses, and the approval of new courses, is taken by an academic board as part of our governance structure and as part of the higher education governance.
Well, the quote I was sharing with you was from our panel already this morning, that high-risk decisions have been taken by the management. That's not just academic decisions, but neglect on other campuses. Decisions that have been taken show a neglect to the other campuses. Do you recognise that?
No, I don't. I think the decisions that are taken by the SRUC board are built on sound business cases, which are reflected by the evidence and data to support those decisions.
We've received a lot of communication from the Ely and Aylesbury, I think it is, Community Council, and I know there has been some dialogue with them. What's happened with the breakdown in communication and trust? They're an important statutory body in the area that... the Community Council and SRUC. You'll be aware
Which
of...
community councils?
Ely and Aylesbury. Have I got that? Yeah.
I think we don't engage with the Ely Council. We're engaging with the Cooper Community Council.
But you have had some meetings, because one of the meetings I was told got cut short. SRUC have met with Ely and Aylesbury Community Council. You've seen in our papers for today's...
As part of the Community Council, the Cooper Elmwood Community Council, yes.
OK, but you've seen in our papers, you've read our papers for today and you know, quite extensive communication from this particular Community Council. No?
I'm aware of those exchanges.
You're aware of...
I'm aware of those exchanges, yes.
Yeah. So my question was going to be, how does it get to a situation where there's such a breakdown there? I mean, there's clear concerns coming from this Community Council about an issue in the locality that they represent.
I think let's go back to the Elmwood campus, which I think is what is being referred to here. Am I correct, Mr. Convener? Yeah. So if we go back to Elmwood campus, there are three things we're doing at the moment which is fundamental to be able to improve matters at Elmwood. One is the development of a new degree programme in sustainable golf management. Second, the initiation of a review by Professor Sir Ian Boyd. I want to thank Mr Rennie for his engagement with us at our last board meeting, which took place at Elmwood. So Ian will explore the opportunities for developing future economic and social engagement built on the assets that we have at Elmwood campus. And also, we are at an advanced stage in negotiations on future partnerships with respect to the Elmwood golf course. This will provide exciting new opportunities. It's at a commercially sensitive stage, so I can't disclose any more on that, but I'm very happy to come back to the committee on those matters. So what I'm referring to, Convener, is that we are making progress with the delivery of Elmwood. On Elmwood, let us go back to a meeting that took place in Parliament on March 30th, 2017. And in that session, some of today's parliamentarians were present on that day, and that discussed the consequences of Fife College exiting the Cooper campus, removing the student places from Elmwood, and the consequences of that, and the commissioning of rocket science report to examine the implications of that. So what we're dealing with here in terms of the engagement with Elmwood goes back to many, many years, to decisions that have taken place regarding the future sustainability of Elmwood. What we've done is saved Elmwood.
You've saved it?
Yes.
But what's left?
Well, what's left is a campus that is now potentially investable. I think we have to be clear, Mr. Convener, without Elmwood being part of SRUC, Elmwood would not exist. It would not be financially sustainable.
Describe for people watching this session what's there now then.
I'm sorry?
Describe for people watching this session what's there now. What have you achieved? What's on the ground at the moment that you're proud that you've saved? Because what I've seen is quite different to that.
What I'm referring to is the fact that we have, in terms of our strategy and the direction you referred to earlier, Convener, is a commitment to a tertiary education model, a place-based model.
You were trying to say, just explain then what you've achieved by...
What I'm trying to do that, we have three elements of our strategy. One is a tertiary model, two is a place-based model, and three is collaboration with communities in order to achieve the goals that we've set out in our strategy and ambition. One is we have a tertiary model at Elmwood. We have FE and HE courses going on together. Two, we have a place-based approach and we've retained our presence in Elmwood. And third, working with the community has proven to be a challenge. And I think the problem that we face, Convener, is the negative narrative around Elmwood and what we do not have at Elmwood is causing our staff to be demotivated. It is not conducive to attracting students, and is potentially not attractive to further investment. What I would like to achieve, as I outlined at the last session I was here, which you convened, was to work constructively with the community and stakeholders to look to the future of Elmwood. And that's what we're doing in the three examples I provided to you in terms of what's on the ground. One is a new degree course. Two, we've got a review taking place to look at what the future of that Elmwood campus would look like. And third, we've also got some interesting and positive developments with respect to the Elmwood campus.
And the new degree course is what's the new degree course?
The new degree course in Sustainable Golf Management.
But is that not all online?
It's online. And so
it could be done anywhere?
I think, Mr. Convener, I think this committee is taking evidence on the future of a tertiary system. Okay? What we are doing is responding to demand. We're responding to demand of learners who want to continue working and to obtain additional skills through distance learning and work-based learning. If you look at the work that Gordon Brown's think tank is providing, which I believe Mr. Rennie is on the advisory board of. Recently, there was a study published which was around agile skills for changing economy, which is repeating the plea that we have to have a different skills system for Scotland to match changes in the demographics and the economy. And what that is saying, that there should be more opportunities for students to learn while they continue to working, where they blend getting practical skills with new skills which can support their future development, which is stackable. So that's what we're doing. So I do not accept for 1 minute that having distance learning is negative. It is also about ensuring that we have parity of esteem between FE and HE, and that is part of that process.
There's a lot of other members I want to get in, but I just wonder, Mr Ross, how do you think your members would reflect on what they've heard from Professor Powell?
Thanks very much, Convener. Our members, certainly with regards to Elmwood, would not probably agree with what Mr Powell has said this morning. I think you only need to look at the history of what's happened at Elmwood campus and the selling off of assets and failure to reinvest the money made from those back into that estate. You know, you had an animal care unit which had great expense spared on it and then was subsequently shut down. You've also got to take into context as well the geographic location. You're looking at the nearest FE college is Fife College, which is 13 miles away. But it takes you over an hour to get there by public transport. So therefore, the community around Cooper and subsequent other communities and towns around that are now being kind of eroded away with regards to what they're able to access with regards to education. And I think you've made the point there yourself. You know, they are looking at opening up other courses and designating them as being run from Elmwood, but ultimately they are distance learning courses and they don't need to be perhaps delivered from Elmwood. I think you've also referred to the fact being that there has been issues with consultation regarding the local community as well, and I think that the local community, certainly the feeling from the local community that I've been made aware of is that they are very distraught at the fact being that Elmwood seems to be an absolute shell of itself. If you look back pre-merger, Elmwood College in its own right had over £3 million in reserves prior to merger, and it was a flourishing college. At this moment in time, it does not appear to be that that's the case, and that's over 14 years' worth of merger with SRUC. Our members are very distraught at the fact being that Elmwood does seem to be at the brunt of this. There is a distinct feeling that that similar could happen to Oakridge and Barony as well, and that there is a key focus on investment in Aberdeen and Edinburgh, and potentially Inverness with Ravik. And that would be catastrophic. I think from an FE perspective, SRUC had potentially a bit of a safety net when the FE mergers were taking place in 2013, because you do have a large geographic spread of FE colleges across Fife, Highlands and Islands, etc. And they were able to capture students who would not be afforded FE provision at SRUC. And so I think that that's also kind of played into that. I mean, I know that Mr Powell has said that Fife College pulled out of Elmwood, and they did so because they were wanting to take that back to their own campuses, but that has had an impact within the local community. I mean, Elmwood wasn't just a land-based college. It provided land-based courses, but it also provided courses in hairdressing, you know, business. It provided courses across the spectrum of FE. That's now no longer there. And I think that that's to the detriment of SRUC and the local community.
Mr Van Herken.
Yeah, I have many points to make here. Management knew for years as well that repairs had to be done in Elmwood campus. That repairs had to be done also in the residential services there. but it just waited. No repair was done. And then again, like this happened a couple of years now, but it's really worth bringing it up. Because again, with residential services, it was not only the fact that residential services were cancelled, but it's also the way management went about it. So it kind of announced the decision that the residential services had to be closed. At that moment, it was still taking in applications for students coming there. And again, like students were absolutely outraged because students were who were staying at residential services, they were now all of a sudden having to commute from Dundee. And we do have sometimes, it's said in SRC, a problem with students dropping out and whatnot, and that can be for various reasons. But again, these are issues that are contributing to this. Also, it creates less students coming to courses in SRC. So I find it personally very hard to speak about SUC in this way because I think it's a beautiful institution because of its people. But there are constantly these issues being created, and the source of it is management, is the management of SRC. So as the Elmwood campus is now boarded up, fair enough, you can say, well, Fife College took out significant curriculum there. But again, it's your job then as management to make sure new curriculum is brought in and that you recruit more students. But the biggest issue we have in SRC at the moment is that all the departments, wherever you go, are short-staffed there, and also staff are incredibly underpaid as well and taking on more and more responsibilities. Believe it or not, last year an email went out from Wayne Powell to all staff to say we had to cut staffing costs further by £5 million. So again, I don't want to deviate from the issue of Elmwood here, but again, I have an entire list of issues that are happening in SRC, and again, preparing for this meeting was quite difficult because there were so many people who asked me to bring up A, B, and C, and the Elmwood, I believe, is an exemplar, but it's a great example. But again, it's not just Elmwood. Like if you go to Oak Ridge campus, for instance, residential students there, they don't even have warm water. So if you go out for a whole day working in the cold and you come back and the only thing you want is just like a nice warm shower, and students can't have there because, again, we spent lots of money, like millions on their Nexus, Greenshed, Vertical Farm, etc. And if it works out, that's absolutely great. But again, there are so many outstanding repairs to be done, and buildings are being completely neglected. I really would like to hear a promise from Wayne Powell, if he can guarantee that in the next 10 years we still will have the residential services, pardon me, in Oak Ridge and in Barony, if we can make sure also the Barony campus will not go the same way as the Elmwood campus went. I would like to ask him that. And then, very lastly, I would like to say as well, hammer on the point, we had a fantastic animal care course in Elmwood. It was really outstanding. Again, there was an initial announcement made that that course was going to close. Then students protested, which was fantastic. There was a big protest in the community in Cooper. Then this decision was deferred for a year. There was promise made by management that we're going to look at options of where to put the animal care course, maybe outside the building, right? A year later, the same decision is being made. Not only that, students had to wait till after the first deadline for what's the name? The CAS, the UCAS, pardon me. Yeah, so it happened also after the big first deadline for UCAS, which meant that those students who were then in that very difficult position had a lesser chance of going to other institutions in Scotland to continue their course. So again, there's problem after problem happening, and the source of it is really management of SRUC.
I'm going to go to John Mason, but there was a particular question, a number there, but one in particular, Professor Powell. Can you give that guarantee of the future for residential and the Oak Ridge and Barony campuses? In 10 years' time, will they still be here?
Our strategic plan, convener, is clear that we have a place-based approach, which I referred to earlier, which includes the colleges, the former, which includes Barony, Oatridge and Elmwood. That is laid out in our strategic plan. I think in order for us to do that, we've got to be looking forward, and we've got to be collaborating, and we're going to have to work together to achieve those outcomes, as we have been successfully doing to date.
And that includes residential?
Pardon?
That includes residential?
Residential accommodation, yes. Yes, I think it's...
So we've got a guarantee from the principal that that continues at least for the next 10 years.
Yeah.
John Mason.
Thanks very much, convener. I'm kind of looking at the financial statements to start with, so I'm probably aiming at yourself, Professor Powell, but if any of the others want to come in, you're very welcome too. Reading your principal's report in the financial statements, it says, I'm pleased to note a clear turnaround in our operating results during the year, supported by a careful implementation of our financial recovery plan. But at the same time, I'm looking at your reserves on page 30 of the accounts, and the reserves have fallen from 28 million in April 24 to 15 million in July 25, which is quite a big drop. Can you explain how these tie together? That things have improved, but your reserves have fallen by 13 million.
The reserves fell because of a combination of deficit and investments that were made in infrastructure and investments in areas of development. So, I mean, you reserve that this is your running costs, your day-to-day costs, not capital investment. That wouldn't affect the reserves, would it? Well, our cash at the moment is 11.1 million, which represents 41 days in terms of cash reserves. Yeah, with respect, I wasn't asking about the cash reserves, but I suppose my question, where I'm going with this, is that if your reserves fell from 28 million to 15 million, if that happens another year, you've got no reserves, and if it happens after that, so is the college financially sustainable? You say in your report you're turning it round, but it doesn't appear to be that's the case from the reserves. I think that in terms of our going concern reports, we have an unqualified going concern report for the 10 years I've been at SIUC. Those have been audited, so I'm happy to provide further evidence to the committee subsequently, if that would be helpful. Okay, well, let me try another angle. You say that the report was written by yourself. Is that correct? So when you say a clear turnaround, Sure, you
this is July 25.
Yeah.
So I say year, it's 16 months. I realise because you brought your accounts into line with the other colleges and universities. Is that right? You note a clear turnaround in your operating results. Well, could you explain what the turnaround has been? How have you saved costs? How have you increased income, or whatever? So we've saved costs by managing our staff replacements, managing staff costs. We've also reduced our expenditure in terms of travel and consumables. We've also reduced our capital spend. But the main reduction has been in terms of staffing levels, not replacing staff that are leaving, and also in terms of our expenditure. This is completely in line with the financial recovery plan that we created in 2024. We have moved from a deficit of 10.8 million to a deficit of 6.7 million, and that is over a 16-month period, because the important point to remember is that in the year that I think you're referring to, it's a 16-month accounting period rather than the 12-month counting period. And we continue to make good progress. We projected this year to have a loss of 2.1 million, and we're working hard to reduce that even further and subsequently into surplus. So can you say how in the current year or the coming year you are reducing that? Is that further staff cuts or what? I think going forward, we will be
some staff reductions, but also we see opportunities for growth in terms of revenue, in terms of across all of the areas, in terms of research, education, and commercial revenue, growth in those areas, and opportunities as well in terms of international and TNE education offerings. So we see opportunities for growth in those areas and having a strong cost control in terms of our operating budget, particularly with expenditure on travel, consumables, and managing our staff costs very carefully, which has been working very successfully.
Yeah, I mean, I note that the number of staff paid over 100,000 has fallen from 11 to 6, so I can see that there's savings being made there. I mean, I'm not from a farming or agricultural background. When you say you're going to be getting more commercial income, can you maybe explain just what that would be?
Well, one of the important elements of SIUC's finances is the fact that it's got a diverse set of income streams from education, research and commercial. In terms of our commercial income, we have a number of revenue streams that include vet services, laboratory, our consultancy services, and commercial offering associated with development of skills and also other services. So it's a combination of services, knowledge exchange, and a vet services programme.
Okay, thanks. I mean, I think some of my colleagues may want to follow up on some of that. Now, it's investments. This is page 6 of your accounts. It says 13.1 million was invested in transformational projects, and I understand one of the big moves forward has been in the veterinary training. I mean, can you explain? I realise I'm coming at this from a kind of accounting point of view, but there's 13.1 million invested, but I don't see that in fixed assets. That's not in buildings and things, is it? Can you tell us anything about that 13.1 million that was invested?
So of the 13.1 million, approximately 4.5 million would be invested in the vet school. I think I would need to come back to you specifically in where the other investments were made, and I'm happy to do that promptly. I don't have that information in front of me.
That's okay. So tell us about the vet school. The 4.5 million, is that a building or what is it?
So the investments in the vet school include a clinical skills facility of 0.9 million, a lecture theatre of 0.6 million, investment of just short of 1 million with respect to Tulloch Farm, 0.4 million on a large animal handling facility, 1.7 million on a small animal clinic, and there's a further 2 million on a post-mortem facility, which is pending approval from the board.
And is that it complete? Is that complete, or is there more expenditure on that?
I think there's one further item that might be considered going forward, but that will be most of the investments that we're making in the vet school, yes.
Okay. And I think just the final point I was going to ask about, I don't know if this is a bit technical maybe as well, the pension liabilities, that obviously has quite an effect on your accounts. And I realise that's not day-to-day normal expenditure. Can you tell us anything about why there's this liability for pensions?
Well, we have a number of pensions that at SIUC, and I think that what I think you're referring to is not the operational position; it's the changes in the valuation of the pensions, which was approximately 6 million, which resulted in the 13 million overall comprehensive report.
Own pension scheme, or is that joint?
No, there's a number of pension schemes across SIUC. I can't say specifically whether the 6 million is from one pension scheme, but I can come back to you on that.
Yes, okay. Right, I'll leave it at that just now. Thanks.
Willie Rennie.
So we've heard, Professor Powell, welcome to the committee this morning. We've heard from others, and including the community, about the devastating image of Elmwood with boarded up, once proud building, now boarded up. The farm has been sold, the student accommodation's closed, you tried to sell the golf course, that's not succeeded. It's now a shadow of what it used to be. But what really grates with people is that you've invested £12.5 million in Inverness 21 million in Craibston and Aberdeen, another £1 million at Craibston. The Edinburgh campus quad improvements amounted to £2 million to create a modern reception. Yet the building at Cooper is in the state that it is. And you still claim that you've got a regional place-based model. How could you justify that when you're spending so much elsewhere and so little in Cooper?
So, Mr. Rennie, I think, first of all, we're very aware that we need to rebuild Cooper, and that is why, with your support and intervention, we have Syrian looking at the opportunities for the future. What I think we need to ensure going forward, and I think we're in a position now, is that Elmwood is investable, because Elmwood was losing money, and we needed to make sure that any investment that we made represented a return on that investment. And as the previous intervention, as accountable officer, I need to ensure that any investments we make will provide a return and ensure the financial sustainability of SIUC. I'm optimistic that we can look at the future now, but certainly in order to look at the future, we needed to get Elmwood to a point where we could invest into it.
I mean, there's no doubt that Fife College was reckless about, 10 years ago now, when they pulled out and they left you with a large building which was half empty. I get that. It was the drift for years that was frustrating for many people in the community, where all they saw was cut after cut after cut. And they saw no plan for the future. So I'm pleased now that we have Sir Ian Boyd, and I want to ask you a few more questions about that in a minute. But the issue for me is, it looks like the SRUC is more interested in the cities than it is in the cities in Aberdeen, Inverness, Edinburgh, than it is in, say, Oatridge, where we've heard stories about the student accommodation, the poor quality, in Barony, where they feel left out, and also Auchencruive was sold off some years ago, and now Elmwood is facing that. It looks like you're more interested in grand projects in the cities than the kind of regional commitment, particularly around about further education in places like Elmwood, Oatridge and elsewhere. So can you assure me that we have turned a corner on this and that you are committed to a true regional-based policy, not just in the cities?
I can assure you, Mr. Rennie, and if we go back to the merger documents, which essentially referred to Scotland's country colleges, which included Elmwood, which included Oatridge and included Barony, the whole purpose of the creation of SIUC was to create an integrated model going forward. With respect to some of the lessons we can learn, first of all, it's wrong to say that Barony has not received investment. It's received the biggest investment in the south of Scotland, over 30 million. It's received 30 million investment from sources such as UKRI, and the key element of that was working with the South of Scotland enterprise, working with the community, working with us and other partners to create an investable opportunity for the future. The same applies to Aberdeen. The investments in Aberdeen are not only in the West School, we also have the Seed Pod invested with One North East. That again is an example of partnership working to support regional economic development. And when we talk about regional economic development, we talk about innovation skills together. As you will know from your involvement in Gordon Brown's think tank, that's a big issue that's emerging from this. This is not about skills in isolation, but how we bring the two together. What I think is going to be important as far as Elmwood is going forward is that we find ways to work with enterprise agencies and other private funding to support the development of the Elmwood campus going forward. And that's going to require us to be working in partnership.
Okay. Sir Ian Boyd, a significant figure, I think a welcome contribution that he's going to make. What I'm really interested in is this going to be a report that sits on the shelf, or is it going to have financial support behind it? How long is it going to take to produce? And how big does he see Elmwood being at the end of this process? Do you have your own vision about where this goes? I'm interested in whether this is tokenistic or this is going to be something substantial.
I can assure you this is not tokenistic. I think it will be substantial, and I think someone of Syrian stature would not take this on if that was the case. So first point is that it's something which is not a token gesture. This is about really looking with an open mind about what the future opportunities are for Cooper and from Elmwood, but taking a very different, radical and creative approach to examine that. We know that in the North East Fife area there are sources of comparative advantage. So if we look at the potential of the horticulture industry, if we look at the potential of golf, if we look at the potential of tourism, this I don't know what Sir Ian is doing, because this is something that he will be doing independent of me, but we'll be seeking views from yourself and other members of the community, including the community, the Cooper Community Group that we referred to earlier. But back to your substantive point, I am anticipating something quite radical, something which will look at, it will not, I do not anticipate it coming up with specific financials, but I think it will be looking at new financial models to support developments in Cooper, which includes potential investment from the private sector and elsewhere, and Sir Ian will be well placed to provide views on that, given his background, and particularly with respect to UKRI. In terms of timing, he is working on this now, and we expect the report to be available to our board by the end of March, and the report, together with the board's findings, will be made public after that.
Thank you. Just to be clear, the organisation has had extensive communication with Angela Anderson and the Ely and Earls Ferry Community Council, so it's been beyond just Cooper where the interest has been within it, just to make sure that that's...
The board are very happy for all parties to be engaged in this process, and I know Sir Ian will be reaching out accordingly.
Could I just turn to the veterinary course, which I know you're particularly proud of, alongside the degree awarding powers that you've got for the institution. But there is concern in the British Veterinary Association about the degree of support that's provided for veterinary courses at the main institutions, the traditional places that are taught. They believe the level of support that's provided isn't enough to fund the courses, which is why they rely so much on international students. And it's up to about half. In fact, Edinburgh, I think, is over half of the student complement at that qualification is from international students. You don't have that chance. You've got very few international students. I know you're seeking to grow that, but just now it's, 1% of the total number of students at the institution. So where's the money coming from to fund this? Is it funded completely from the students, or is there additional funding coming from elsewhere in the institution?
So, very happy to provide further evidence to support that question, but let me make a start on that, Mr. Rennie. So, the concept of developing the vet school was initiated in 2019. It was opened in 2024, almost immediately after obtaining TOTIC rewarding powers. The design of the new vet school involved an advisory board, which included NFUS chief vet scientist and others. And the design of this vet school is absolutely critical to answering your question. So the design of this vet school is built on learning from Australia in terms of Charles Sturt University, James Cook University, and from North America, where learning from Louisiana State University. There's a couple of things that are relevant to this, if I may continue, Convener, for a moment. First of all, it's the way in which we select those vet students. Coming from rural communities, they have a larger chance of going back into those rural communities and stay in practice. So the whole design of this is different. The second aspect of this is that we will have between 60 or 70 students per year entering. So compared to the other vet schools, it's a small vet school, giving much more support to those individual students. The third element of that is that we will not, and have not invested in a large animal hospital, which is where a large part of the costs that you see in traditional vet schools are incurred. So we will use clinical practices to support our vets in terms of their training, so that they're better prepared to go back into the workplace. The fourth element in terms of viability and sustainability is that we are training our vets alongside agriculturalists, alongside vet nurses, so that we have a diverse set of income streams going into the vet school in terms of supporting the training of students. So it's a very, very different model to that which you see in other traditional vet schools by design.
So is the funding provided by the Funding Council for this qualification sufficient to run the course?
The Council is providing support for our students who then go in to study for the BVet medicine. Now, to be clear, the funding that we are receiving from what the Funding Council have allowed us to do is to take essentially just over 2 places for 1 vet medicine place. So the number of HE places that we will have available will become lower.
So there is no cross subsidy. You're not taking money from elsewhere to fund the veterinary courses. There's no cross-subsidy from elsewhere.
Well, it depends what you mean by cross-subsidy. Within the School of Vet Medicine and Biosciences, that school will be run based on income received from education and research, and, in fact, education and research to support its programme.
Because there is a claim that further education has suffered as a result of the drive to make this a success. So you're saying that there is no money coming from elsewhere that's undermining that provision in order to make this a success?
The development of the vet school is not having a detriment on our FE delivery. As I indicated at the outset, Mr. Rennie, 43% of the overall student places at SIUC are FE, and we intend to keep that proportionality going forward as the vet school develops.
So you don't see the need to significantly increase international students to make this a success, do you?
So there's also been a question around the vet school around accreditation. So let me put that to bed as well. Any new vet school is not accredited until you've gone through your first cohort of students, which will be in 2029, and that is when you would get accreditation, and this applies to every other vet school. If in terms of your question, so for SIUC to be training vets internationally, we would need to go through that accreditation process first.
Okay. You're very animated about degree qualifications, about the degree awarding powers, about the veterinary course, about the HE provision. I don't see you animated as much about the further education provision. Staff feel that as a result. They see it. They see how, when you speak, that you speak passionately about all those things at the upper levels, as they would see it, whereas they feel left behind. And despite what you say about the proportion, the split between FE and HE, they feel as if they don't care about that as much as you care about elsewhere. So tell me why that's the wrong perception of what you're doing about it to try and make sure that it's seen as a rounded institution that values all parts of it.
So you raised this at the last session, Mr. Rennie, and I do take it seriously, and I've thought carefully about that, and I've thought about how I can address that. What gives me energy is not whether it's FE or HE, but it's the progression that the tertiary model that SIUC has provides. So you will see in this booklet and in the note that's been sent to you with a link a number of examples of where people
students have progressed from FE to HE, and others that have stopped at a particular point and gone on to have rewarding careers. So I personally am here because I believe in the tertiary model. I believe in the parity of esteem between FE and HE, and the whole rationale by obtaining degree awarding powers was not just to award degrees, it was to be able to provide a rounded tertiary education system to support learners for the future and to support the needs of industry going forward.
Okay. One final question, Convener, if that's okay. The animal care unit closure. What lessons have you learnt from that episode about how you handled it and the decisions that you reached?
A great question, Mr. Rennie. A great question. I think the first is communication, and maybe this is an opportunity to address one point. There is no connection between the closure of the animal care facility and the vet school. The animal care facility at Elmwood was a non-clinical facility. What we developed for the vet school was a clinical facility which was critical to obtain accreditation. So I think the important part of that is the important part is around communication. I think the second part is really again related to communication. If you look at the original merger documentation that I think has been shared with you, you will see from that there were two things that were clear from the review that was conducted, and that is an oversupply at FE of horticulture and what they just described as pet and domestic animal care. So I think what I think I've learned is really the importance of communication, the importance of engaging more with the community. I think that's a fair point, and that's something we'll take on board in terms of going forward. But also I think the need for us to be decisive on these matters, because we cannot sustain everything everywhere, and we have to make some decisions, and we have to do that in the best possible way we can, with compassion and care, but they still need to be made.
So do you regret how it was all handled and the damage that it's clearly done to a lot of young people who saw that as a lifeline? They thought, I mean, I've met many of the students, you've met them too. They relied on that unit to give them a chance, and you've taken that away from them. So do you regret that decision, the handling of it, and the impact on those young people?
I don't regret the decision. The decision was the right decision. It was the right decision to make. Inevitably, we can all learn on the way in which we communicate that, but I don't regret the decision. The decision was absolutely the right decision to make in order to ensure that we have a financially sustainable Elmwood campus to be able to move forward and do the things that we just discussed. I have huge amounts of empathy for the individual students and parents that we met jointly together, but it was the right decision.
Okay, I think they'll disagree. And I really worry about people like them and others in the community who will have to travel very long distances to get a very similar opportunity. So I really worry about them, but I think I've said enough.
Yeah.
Please, yeah.
I do as well, but I think, there are... I'm attempting to answer your questions as honestly and as directly as I can here. But there are some things about transport of students from Cooper to other parts of Fife and elsewhere in Scotland predates SIUC, as you well know from Fife Campus and the Rocket Science Report, which clearly demonstrated from the Fife College exit that there was a movement of students from Cooper to the south of Fife into Dunfermline and north into Angus and Dundee that would not be reversed.
Thank you, Convener.
Mr Hall, can I take you in about veterinary medicine? Are NFQS concerned that we don't have enough vets in Scotland? And will the vet school, which is now in its second year, when vets qualify in 2029, will that address these concerns, or is there still a shortage, particularly in large animal?
I think it's a very pertinent point. The capacity, if I can call it that, for veterinary services across Scotland, given Scotland's geography, is something of a concern. If you go to, right now, places like Tyree, for example, are really struggling, and various other places. And I know that other West Coast locations struggle as well in that respect. And that is critical and of key concern. I think it's been a trend, however, over recent years that a lot of vets qualifying have then gone on to specialise in small animal practices where it's, dare I say, more lucrative, and that we have got a significant capacity problem with large animal practices and their distribution across Scotland. The other challenge, of course, came post-Brexit in many ways, because of the veterinary services required for things like abattoirs and so on. And a lot of those posts were quite often filled by vets from the EU and so on. And that sort of flow of veterinary services, if you like, dried up significantly in recent years. So it is an issue. It is something that our members are concerned about. So having the capacity to grow our own veterinary students and produce veterinary practitioners is important. If we're going to future-proof ourselves as a predominantly livestock-based agricultural sector, the role of veterinary services is critical, right down to very what might seem trivial things like signing off an animal health and welfare plan in order to complete your whole farm plan to unlock a support payment, and that's a critical thing. And again, I think the distribution of veterinary services is important as the veterinary services itself. So certain locations are really struggling in terms of that capacity. So we as an organisation, and I think as an industry more generally, would want to ensure or want to see efforts redoubled to ensure that we have the capacity in the first place to encourage, enable and deliver a thriving, dare I say, population of vets. I don't know what the collective noun is for vets, but there you go. But nevertheless, it is, without being flippant about it, it is an important aspect of the viability of Scottish agriculture. It's not just in that purely clinical sense. The role of the vet in driving or helping to drive efficiencies and improvements in productivity, welfare, and all the other things that are so important going forward is key. A vet is a partner in a farm business in many ways, in terms of that, dare I say, informal advisory provision as well.
And is this something that the government recognise? Do you think they need to do more? Mr Rennie was speaking about the more recognised institutions, Glasgow and Edinburgh, having predominantly, in some cases, international students. If this trend continues, do we get to a tipping point where we simply don't have enough vets in Scotland for animal welfare issues, for that advice? And let's hope it doesn't happen, but if we have an outbreak of a very contagious disease, are we able to respond to that at the moment with the number of vets that we have in Scotland?
I wouldn't like to say whether we would or would not be able to cope with a major disease outbreak, but clearly there's the State Veterinary Service, which is critical in sort of contingency planning and disease surveillance and all the rest of it, and the role that's played by the likes of Sheila Vose as the Chief Veterinary Officer for the Scottish Government and her team is critical. I think we all need to be acutely aware and conscious of the challenges of not having a sufficient veterinary service across Scotland is a risk to Scottish agriculture, but not just to Scottish agriculture, but to then our supply chains in terms of particularly the red meat, dairy sectors and pigs, poultry and so on. And I think that should be very much on the radar of Scottish Government as to how we might invest in the capacity to, as I say, have some sort of pipeline of very willing and able veterinary practitioners who work alongside our farmers and crofters. And again, there are challenges, and it goes back to some of the comments made around the sort of the coverage of SRUC services and other services across Scotland, given the very diverse topography and geography that we have. There's an abundance of vets in certain places. There's clearly a dearth of vets in others, and we need to think about how best we can address those issues.
Thank you. Paul O'Kane.
Thank you very much, Convener, and good morning. I wonder if I can just start on some of the themes that have been previously raised, and in particular on, I suppose, the international comparison. In terms of international students, I think when Professor Powell was at committee last, he stated that there was a desire to have 1% of the international student market. So that's around 700. So I would just be keen to understand how many international students were recruited this year.
So we have recruited approximately 80 this year, and we've also attracted 92 rest of UK students.
Okay, so you would recognise that, obviously, in terms of that 1% figure that you had shared. I mean, is that still the aspiration?
I think the aspiration is for us to grow our student numbers, and relative to other universities in Scotland, it would be small. I think we are balancing our plan is to balance the number of students, international students that would be studying in Scotland with a transnational programme where we would be offering delivery of courses in other host countries. So in terms of our total student number of approximately 2,600, I think 10% of that would be 260 students would be modest. I think the 1% referred to the total number of international students in Scotland rather than our own student body.
Okay. I wonder, in terms of, are you able to say, out of the 80 students that you have recruited, predominantly what countries? Are you aware of that?
I can provide you with a comprehensive list of them, but a number of students would have been coming from Pakistan, I think from some students from Nigeria, but I think there's a broad range of students. I think I will provide you with the facts, but approximately 24 different countries, so quite a broad spread.
So I think that would be helpful. And I wonder, just in terms of the point you made about an internal recruitment from within the other nations of the United Kingdom, I mean, would you recognise that there is a challenge, given that in terms of Northern Ireland's rural colleges, you've got the Greenmount campus in County Antrim receiving a £32 million redevelopment, and Loughrea campus, which is in County Tyrone, with a £43 million investment. So clearly the investment that's been made by the Executive of Northern Ireland and by those colleges in partnership, I mean, would you recognise that will be a challenge in terms of trying to attract students that would normally come from our closest neighbours?
I think that we need to have a balanced portfolio, and we need to be able to attract students from the rest of the UK, but also internationally. We recognise the challenges that are taking place in the island of Ireland, including the development as well of some new vet schools, following the model that we have here in Scotland, or that we have at SIUC. I think the important point is, well, what is important is the distinctiveness that SIUC offers, and this capacity to learn in an environment where you have research, tertiary education from FE to HE, plus the opportunity to work with Scotland's largest consultancy organisation. So I think from the point of view of students interested in agri-food environment, I think SIUC is an outstanding environment, and I think will compete very well with other institutions.
But are you concerned? I mean, the convener at the outset of this morning's evidence session mentioned those discussions with young farmers and NFU about the opportunities that exist for them elsewhere. And I just think with such a significant investment in Northern Ireland, which can be obviously accessed fairly easily from Scotland, I mean, do you recognise that will be a challenge to keep pace with the development there? Particularly, I think, because they are focusing on food, science, innovation, research, student accommodation, some of the issues we've been hearing this morning that are a challenge in terms of the de-investment of campuses here in Scotland. I
think that modernising a curriculum to meet the need of future learners is really important. And that's one area that we are exploring in terms of addressing and mitigating the challenges you refer, and particularly around data and AI. I think these are important areas that we need to be addressing. Look, I think across the globe there's going to be competition for student places, and we need to be positioning ourselves in the best way we possibly can, and that is why we've been making some of the decisions that I've just been referring to, and I've been challenged on. Difficult as they are, we have to recognise that there's competition taking place around Scotland that we need to be aware of, and we need to remain competitive. I think it's also going to be important that we do build on this tertiary model, and a tertiary model that allows students to be able to come in at different entry points, to leave at different entry points, offer micro-credentials and stackable micro-credentials as well. So we need to be developing this in terms of our educational offering and modernisation. But yes, there will be competition, without a doubt.
I wonder if I might broaden it out if anyone else on the panel would like to make a contribution to this point. I mean, we heard about the island of Ireland, both north and south, in terms of the investment they are making in rural education. The government of Ireland have just announced €4.5 million in terms of a distributed campus support fund, actually to try and balance the regional issues that I think we've heard some of this morning. I mean, is that something that you think Scotland should be learning from in terms of how do we support the communities where there has been disinvestment from SRUC in terms of campuses? Now, I appreciate it might be too little too late, but I think it would be useful to just get your sense of, should government be looking across the water to what's happening in Ireland? I don't know if Mr Ross wants to yet.
Yeah, I mean, I think any investment in any campus, especially in rural locations, would be most welcome. You know, I mean, when there is a downturn or a removal of provision from any community, it's not just the educational impact that it has, but it will also have economical impact as well. And so any other form of funding that could come forward to rejuvenate and help, certainly think that the EIS would think that would be most welcome.
Thank you. That's very helpful. Convener.
Bill Kidd. Thank you, Convener. I'll just ask a question, I think most directly, to Gary Ross and Euron van Herk. And this is to what extent the interests of staff at the SRC are being represented and heard in relation to the recent and proposed changes which we've heard about again at the SRC, and how can that engagement between the staff and the college be improved? What's your opinions, please?
Thanks very much for the question. I think it's a very important question, given that so far what we've heard evidence on is about the education and the students, but the staff at SRUC, from my members especially, morale is extremely low. They feel that there is a real centralisation of investment, funding, etc. into Aberdeen and Edinburgh, and there is less so across the other spread of campuses. I think a key element of that, not only is it to do with removal of provision, but it's also to do with ongoing trade union issues, if I'm honest. I mean, SRUC was established in 2011, and so far we still do not have a harmonised pay and grading system. So you're looking at 4 legacy institutions who joined well over 13 years ago, and there are different wage structures and wage spines across the institution. So you'll have legacy pay spines for Barony, Oakridge, Elmwood, SAC, but you'll also have pay spines for those members of staff who joined SRUC post-merger. And that culminated in a dispute in 2021 where staff took industrial action in order to try and rectify that. And at the time, SRUC management and the EIS produced a memorandum of understanding that a pay and grading exercise would be undertaken. And there was a pin date put on that of August 2022. we are still currently sitting with that pay and grading exercise not having been complete. And it's my understanding that the grading exercise of it is only sitting at 60% at the moment. Now, that has a hugely detrimental effect on my members, because if you're looking at typical, or if you're looking at, post-merger SRUC pay spines, they sit substantially below other HE institutions and FE institutions. So the pay of staff at SRUC, lecturing staff, has been eroded quite significantly over the last 10 years or so. And I think drawing parallels to harmonisation in the further education sector over 2016-17, you had 26 colleges, and that was a national bargaining mechanism. So there was wide and varied interest in that pay harmonisation. That has been completed quicker than SRUC have managed between the dispute in 2021 and as we sit currently at the moment. I mean, the national FE pay spine for lecturing staff, the top of an unpromoted lecturer is sitting on £50,000 at the moment, just over. Whereas SRUC, if someone was to join SRUC at the top of their unpromoted pay scale today, it sits at £45,000. So it's £5,000 of a reduction. And that's not including, that's comparing it to FE. If you're comparing it to HE in a typical higher education institution, top of an unpromoted lecturer pay scale there is £55,000. It's £10,000 less. That's hugely detrimental to staff. And it's not just from a purely tangible point of view around cash. You know, what does that say to the staff? It's going to have, we would expect it will have a huge impact on recruitment and retention. I mean, if you could teach a similar course in an alternative institution, your pay probably jumps quite significantly, quite soon. But there's also been issues regarding progression for staff. You know, FE staff, do they have adequate routes to progress their formal qualifications? Are they able to take a step into the degree programme, PhD level, and go on to teach higher education? Our members are saying that they don't see that is the case. They don't think that there is an adequate route or pathway into that. So, yeah, there is a real issue with that. My members, again, as I said, they decided to cancel their strike action in 2021 on the understanding that this pay and grading exercise would have been done with haste, and it has failed to do so. And any time that we've been asking about when we expect a completion date on this, we're never given a date. So it's a really prevalent problem, I think, across SRUC.
Thank you. Jeroen?
Yeah, no,
And Herc, just for 1 second, do you want to ask that question just now then, since we have the principal with us?
Yeah, I mean, my members, the EIS, and I would imagine Unison and Prospect would love to know when the pay and grading exercise will be completed.
Professor Powell.
Thank you. So a couple of points, if I may.
Get an answer on that, because I want to hear from Mr Van Herk. So do
you want me to answer the question?
The question about when the negotiations will be completed.
I have a broader answer to give, because I think there are several elements of...
Give us an answer to that first, please.
In order to answer that question, I've got to provide evidence to support some of the statements that have just been made. I think the first is that in terms of union engagement, we only have 2 unions present here today, not the 3 unions that represent SIUC. The second point is that we have union members on our board that have been involved and engaged with all of the decisions that have taken place. The third point is that in terms of harmonisation of terms and conditions, that was completed on the 1st of April 25 and no detriment to staff. In terms of pay and grading, this is a really important point. It's a complex process, and we are 70% of the way there. It's complex because we have various job descriptions within any job title. Now, I don't want to bore the committee with this, but what we are committed to achieving, to answer your question, is an equitable and transparent pay and grading system that is fit for a tertiary education model that spans educational delivery from SCQF4 to 12. So within that tertiary model, you will have lecturers delivering at different points in that, and therefore getting the job description right and the parity of pay for that is our objective, and I can commit to getting that achieved. We are 70% of the way there, and we continue to make progress. We cannot do this in isolation. We need to be able to do this with engagement with the unions. And as opposed to colleges, we have an HEI, and we do not get the support that colleges do get in terms of pay settlements.
So that wasn't an answer to the question. The question was when, not how or the circumstances behind it, but when.
At this point, it's difficult to give a definitive answer as to when it will be, because we are still working through all of those processes, but we are making progress. We brought in additional help from an external agency to be able to achieve this, but I cannot give a specific point at this time, because I'm happy to come back to the committee with further information, but we're progressing this as fast as we possibly can.
Well, are you, though? Because it does seem to have been going on for a long time. And do you have a target date? If you can't tell us it will definitely be done by this, do you have a period where you hope it is done? And
I can tell you that I hope it will be done during 26, but I cannot provide specific guarantees. I'm happy to come back to you, Mr. Convener. I understand you pressing this matter. I also understand, I want to emphasise, there's a complexity around this that we need to address. There are legal issues around this, there are contractual issues around this, and we are 70% through this process, and I hope we will continue to make the best progress we possibly can.
Mr. Ross, will your members be content that it might be done this year?
Again, obviously, sooner rather than later would be appreciated, and but again, you know, it's as I've kind of stressed previously, you know, 26 regional colleges managed to harmonise a national pay scale within a few years, and the dispute that was taken out at SRUC was had a line drawn under it at the tail end of 2021, and we're now into 2026, and we still feel no further forward. And again, just to come back on Mr Powell's point, my understanding is that it's the grading exercise that's been progressed. There is still no work being done on what a pay spine may look like, and you know that is concerning, given the fact being that other HEIs far outstrip lecturing staff at SRUC with regards to their pay.
Sorry, Mr Van Herk, you were about to respond to Mr Kidd.
Fine, no worries. Yeah, so there's many things that Gareth Ross was saying that I absolutely agree with. The morale in SRUC is spectacularly low. It's very low. When I speak to our members, like the big issue is indeed pay. Like you can go to other campus and you get there £8,000 better paid, and not only that, you have also less of a workload. You have less responsibility, because not only that is in place, also our departments are absolutely overstretched. And it's very strange that, like, we have all these projects that we want to create all these beautiful buildings, and we spent millions on it. At the same time, we have all these buildings that are completely neglected. In the same way, we want to grow our student body. We want to create more students, but at the same time, again, we struggle in some areas also to get staffing, because again, you can get a job elsewhere for way more money, and again with less responsibilities, and again, so there's all these contradictions, and they're very good examples. I was frankly very surprised when I was reading the evidence provided by SRUC management to this committee, when it was speaking, for instance, about the apprentices, right? So I spoke to apprentice and work-based placement staff, and they said, indeed, we have grown in this area for roughly 50% in the last couple of years. But at the same time, we have lecturing staff who constantly say, well, if we really want to grow in this area, we need more staffing. We have gone to senior management, we have asked for more staffing, and we're simply not getting it. So again, like there's, it really has a big effect on SRUC. Again, not only pay, but also the very fact that we're completely understaffed. And at the same time, management is saying that we need to have cutting exercise by cutting £5 million in terms of spending on staffing. It's really the world upside down. If I could just come to the pay negotiations as well, like we're now in a position that we're asking for restitution pay because last year pay, which was also exceeded like incredibly late at the point when we were getting the pay deal negotiated. But again, it was incredibly little compared to the rest of the sector, and it's incredibly demoralizing if you see other colleagues at other colleges being part of a national bargaining process, getting like twice as much in their pay deal than we get. Again, it's very damaging to the reputation, I would say, of SRUC as well. It's really bad for the staff morale, and staff are really fed up with it, frankly.
Okay. Just before you come back, Professor Powell, can I just ask Mr. Ross and Mr. Van Herk, in negotiation, which obviously has been going on for a while, but during negotiation, do you feel that there is advance and movement? Are you positive about how things are developing on behalf of your staff's payment structures?
It's very slow. Like I have to say, I'm quite a new rep. I've only been in place for less than half a year, but I've been to a number of pay negotiation meetings, and like the message we get from management is simply, oh, well, there's not enough money, we can't afford this, and yeah, I really pressed, and also from Unison perspective, we really pushed for having these negotiations being done quicker than last time, because last time, again, it took incredibly long. We were told that we hope to reach a point around March, April, but again, I'm not very optimistic in that sense.
Okay, Mr. Ross,
I'll try and be as succinct as I possibly can be. The pay. A pay agreement was reached for 24-25, but that was only reached a few months ago. So we're already behind in pay uplift for staff. So 25-26 hasn't been agreed. And SRUC sit outside the New Junches Agreement, which is a UK-wide pay body, which agrees pay. And again, SRUC, I haven't sat in local negotiations, but I am aware of them. And the initial offer of 2% was rejected by staff, and therefore they were balloted to see if they would consider taking action to see that increased. And SRUC came back and increased it by 0.25%. So ultimately the staff have accepted that, but I think that was more to do with the fact being of the delay in the amount or time when that pay was going to be processed. As I said, we're now behind on 2025-26 negotiations. And again, this is a kind of key theme, which is you're having to continue to fight extremely hard for something which should be something which is a relatively simple process, and having an understanding that your staff require a cost of living increase.
Okay, thank you. And Professor Powell, if you mind, if I could ask you, please, having heard what you have here from the trade union and staff side, I do know that you've said that there's been problems about ensuring the financial improvement within the SRUC, etc. But is it possible, do you think, that the staff side can be raised up to the same level of importance as the development of buildings, etc., and so that everyone can go forward together.
The importance of staff are paramount. If I may, Convener, I'd like to go back to some of the comments that were made to offer a view. The first is that I think it's really important to get the evidence, and I think I'm happy to provide evidence to this committee in terms of some of the comments that are being made. In terms of negotiations, we have a JNCC committee that undertakes these negotiations. I don't think this is the forum to undertake that, and particularly as we do not have one union present, and not all our staff are members of the union. In terms of the morale, that is not what we see in terms of our staff surveys. That is not what we see in terms of our retention, where we retain. Our retention rates are very high. And secondly, it is not what we see in terms of the feedback that we get through levers and through other surveys. We are going to be undertaking a pulse survey this year, and I'm very happy to share that pulse survey with this committee. I'll pause there. Oh, just one other point in terms of your question, and in light of the financial pressures that we are under. For SRUC, every 1% increase in pay represents £750,000, and in the projected deficit that we have this year of 2.1 million, that includes an allocation of 1.5% for pay increases. So another increase in whatever it is would increase that deficit by £750,000 at least, cumulative, and also would have other implications for SIUC.
Okay, thank you. Thank you all very much indeed for being so open and honest about things. And I'm absolutely certain that the committee and everyone else will be hoping that things can develop as positively as possible. And Professor Powell, if you could let us have those figures, please, so that we can see just how things are progressing, please. Thank you.
Thank you. Ross Greer.
Thanks, Convener. I'd like to, just in parallel to Bill Kidd's line of question, I'm conscious that we don't have anyone here who represents students, but various folk have talked about the efforts that you've made to get feedback from students, which is appreciated. Mr. Powell, you've mentioned a couple of times the SREC strategic plan. Just to start off with, could you talk us through how the perspective of students was taken into account in developing that plan?
So the strategic plan was first developed in 2023. Since 2023, there's been significant engagement with staff and students through both the staff members that are on our board, through the Staff Student Association, through coffee mornings that we've been having with staff and students, and with engagement. I can provide you with a copy of our engagement plan that covers staff and students that would provide, I think, specific answers to your question. There has been internal consultation and external consultation in terms of development of our strategic plan. Since 23, we've also been developing a performance framework around our strategic plan, and that's why it's taken a little bit longer to develop.
Your position, how do you make sure that you're engaged directly with students? What efforts do you make to make sure that you're getting unfiltered direct feedback and a kind of broad perspective on what the student body is feeling?
Because I meet with Student Association representatives once a month together with my provost.
And what's the kind of feedback that they've been giving you over the last couple of years through this? What has undoubtedly been a challenging period?
I think that I'm sorry. There is also another. Forgive me, Mr. Greer. There's another mechanism which is an important one, which is a student liaison forum, which is chaired by one of our board members, that operates across all of the campuses. So the answer to your question is that not only do I get feedback from students, but also the board get feedback from those students through the governance arrangements that I just referred to back into the board. So those are two mechanisms that in terms of providing student feedback. In terms of my engagement with students and through the co-presidents of the Student Association. I think there's a couple of things that come through. One is, of course, the broad area of anxiety that we're hearing across the sector about finances. I think within SRUC, the changes that have taken place with respect to the formation of schools, and also how we're addressing the formation of those schools and the importance of delivery of our courses with respect to those schools. So those are two examples of that feedback. But there's broad feedback through the mechanisms I've described, and this is taken very seriously by our board, and significant time is devoted to it.
We've heard already from others on the panel, and in fact the convener gave examples from young farmers and farm workers who've spoken directly to him and to other members. Did any of that resonate with you? We had a really tangible example of students just being able, wanting to get a hot shower when they've been working outdoors, but the facilities not making that possible. Does that resonate with you? Is that the kind of feedback that you are familiar with, or is that the first time that you're hearing of something like that?
I think that we're very aware of the demand. If I've understood your question, you may need to repeat this. Could you repeat it, please? I'm not sure if I've understood your question.
So the kind of tangible examples that we've heard already this morning of clearly negative feedback from students and a clear desire for tangible improvements in their learning conditions. So, for example, being able to get a hot shower if they've been working outdoors. Have you heard feedback like that directly, or is that that example, is that the first time that you're hearing about that today?
I'm a little bit surprised, but I'm very happy to take that on board and take it back and to explore that further. I'm a little bit surprised because the conversations that I'm having with our lecturers who are teaching agriculture, I'm a bit surprised, but I'm very happy to take that back and follow up with the committee. The conversations I'm having with certainly our lecturers are that some of the innovation that we're bringing into the curriculum is welcomed. And I think the balance between practical training and the other aspects of training, the balance seems to be right. But I'm very happy to take that back, to explore that further and come back to you.
Thanks. And Mr. Hall, a lot of your members obviously are either recent former students, or indeed you will engage all the time with those who are current students. The kind of feedback we've been talking about this morning, does that align with the discussions that you're having, the kind of informal feedback that you get, that much as there is a high level of satisfaction with the quality of the learning and teaching that is provided by lecturers, that there are these really tangible frustrations from the students as well, whether it is about the kind of stuff that we've heard about facilities, or even just that sense that their voice has not been heard in a lot of the strategic decision making over the last couple of years?
I have not heard that directly at all. I don't get that feedback. We definitely, as an organisation, get feedback about, if you like, the quality and the practicality of much of the teaching experience and things like that. But that's very much on an individual basis. We don't canvass opinion on that from our members or the members of our members' families, if that makes sense. An awful lot of our members have been through what was originally Scottish Agricultural College previously, before SRUC. A number of our members are graduates, if you like, and put it that way, of the SRUC we know today. As I say, none of that feedback in terms of the experience, if you like, if I can call it that, comes back to us. As I said up front, our interest in how SRUC performs and delivers for the industry is in and around education. It's around that sort of practical applied research, and it's also about the advisory services, which are so important if we're going to develop and deliver as an industry going forward. In that sense, as I said earlier on, we need an effective and functioning SRUC to help with that, but it's not all about SRUC in that sense. There's lots of other agents acting out there that are important to how Scottish agriculture evolves and moves forwards and drives efficiency to deliver for all the objectives that it's being asked to do. But on that particular aspect about whether the showers are hot or cold at Oakridge, I couldn't possibly comment.
Fair enough. Thank you. And Gary and Jeroen, I know you're not here to represent the students, but obviously you have a lot of engagement. You've already mentioned this morning some of the discussions that you've had. Is there anything else that you want to add in terms of the feedback that you've heard, either from your members or about the feedback they've then in turn had from students, or anything that you've had directly?
So I can say a couple of things on here. So the reason why I know is also because I do work with the Student Association. So, and the biggest survey that it conducts every year is called Speak Week. So that feedback is then collated, and Professor Powell should know about it, because it's SRC management who then also gives a reply to that, and then from that there will be commitments made by the Student Association and by SRC of how to improve the situation. So that information is out there, and management should be aware of that. But I'm here to represent our union, Unison, and our members. But if I can speak about students, like students do not always feel listened to. Like, for instance, we're in a cost of living crisis, and students have said year on year on year that the food, for instance, is too expensive in the catering. Actually, the company providing that the catering is quite annoyed, because, frankly, the food prices continue to go up 10% every year. And students blame that company, but it's not the company who sets prices. It's SRC management who have been putting the prices up 10% year on year on year, which is very frustrating for students who are really struggling to make ends meet. So again, and there's a new food contract going out in a couple of days' time. I worry, frankly, a bit for those students, like particularly international students who study, for instance, in Crepeston. When they go to the food hall in Aberdeen Uni, I don't know if you have been there, there's options of 5 different venues where you can eat there. And then they come to SRC, where like the prices are very high and there's just not much there. So that's why I can say from students. But if I could also comment to something that Johnny Hall was saying, is that like I recognize our delivery in SRC is absolutely amazing, but that's because our staff is absolutely amazing. And that's another thing from the Speak Week data that we receive. We have this open question. We ask to students, okay, so what would you like to improve in SRC, but also what do you really love about SRC? And 9 out of 10 comments that are received is that students are saying, I absolutely love my lectures, I absolutely love the staff that support me in my work. So again, staff are really great, but we simply don't get the pay that recognize that, and we're absolutely understaffed as well. And very sadly, rather than increasing staff, we have now staff that are being cut. Could I just say one more quick thing, just to pick up on international students, because it was mentioned before. Because also in the evidence that SRC management provided to the committee here, was said indeed that focus that would be great if we had 1% of our of all the international students in Scotland, and that would equate to 750,000 students. But again, the way we went about getting those 80 students in SRC was incredibly chaotic, and I don't say this just out of opinion. I went to our international student staff to ask how that went. Now, as a result, our forecasted operating deficit is 2.1 million, as is written in the paper. But originally, it was meant to be £1 million. Again, why is that? Well, we're being told it's because we don't really have January starts. Why don't we have January starts? Because it was just so chaotic to have to have our September starts. Like, students came in late, students missed the induction, we didn't have enough staffing levels as well. Again, I don't want to emphasize too much on all those problems, but again, staff are just absolutely exhausted. They're really exhausted, and we're completely understaffed. And I just want to put that message forward, because in all frankness, like, I think you give a good grilling of Wayne, Professor Powell here, but tomorrow it's just back to business. And again, like, all these problems will continue to occur. And staff are just asking me, and I know this because a lot of Unison members came to me, and they were just basically telling me, great that there's a parliamentary committee hearing, but what will actually be done? It's unlike football. If you're a manager in football, you maybe get to manage your team for a couple of matches, but if you lose 5 times in a row, you're sacked. But in education, becoming a principal or senior management almost seems like a life peerage. Yeah, so that's why I would like. Sorry for my rant here, but yeah.
No, that was very useful. At the risk of straying it with my agreed area of question, Convener, I would like to hear from Professor Powell, particularly on that point around international students and what we've heard, that it seems that revenue was lost because the administration of bringing in international students wasn't effective enough. Do you recognise that?
I think the international students coming to SIUC is a massive success story. I think the cultural diversity that it brings to SIUC is huge. We have specific staff that have been hired to address and deal with some of the points that are being raised. And I'm very happy to come back to the committee, or indeed for the committee to come and visit some of our international students and get an understanding of this firsthand. So I'm very happy.
With respect, Professor, I want to press on this point, because we all agree.
And I want to come back to you, if I may, on some of the other points after that.
We all agree bringing international students to Scotland has tremendous benefits, but what we've specifically just heard is that because the administration of that was not effective enough, that a £1 million deficit essentially became a £2 million deficit because revenue was lost. There was an opportunity to bring students in earlier, have more revenue, but that wasn't realised because the administration of the system was not effective enough. Do you recognise that, and is that a point of learning that is being taken on board?
I recognise that the international students are vital for our revenue. I do not think it's an administrative matter entirely within SIUC. The allocation of visas is an important factor, together with the timing of the course creation. So there are issues that we need to. I do recognise, let me come back to the point, I do recognise that we need to be streamlining our administrative process and procedures to optimise international student attraction and delivery. It's a fair comment, and it's something we look at going forward. I think the point I wanted to make is, in relation to your earlier questions, we have been working diligently with NFUS and industry in terms of co-design of courses for our students. In terms of catering, we've been working on co-design with our co-presidents of the Students' Union to support the delivery of catering facilities within the financial constraints that we faced with.
Thank you. Thanks, Peter.
Can I just, on that point, Mr Hall, because I was going to ask a kind of follow-up to the questions Mr Greer was asking you, how involved are NFUS? You're the representative body of the farming community in Scotland, and Professor Powell has just said you're involved in the co-design of courses. Is it as much as that? Are you co-designing SRUC courses?
I'm not.
No? Are NFUS?
There is a reasonably close liaison in that respect, and I think it would be fair to say that Professor Powell and his colleagues throughout SRUC in different ways do use NFU Scotland members as sounding boards as to what would be appropriate, practical, relevant course material, etc., for a changing agricultural environment. I think that's only right that SRUC are open to input from the industry, which they help underpin. And that, again, I go back to the point, it's not just about the education side, it's about what is relevant applied research. So we feed into things like the Strategic Research Programme in terms of the sorts of things we think that Scottish Government funding should be going to, not only SRUC but the other research institutes in Scotland, so that it's more applied research that can be then rolled out in terms of knowledge exchange and delivery on the ground at a pragmatic and practical scale. So it's right that the industry, whether it's via ourselves or others, does have input both to education and the applied research and the advisory services that are provided as well. As I say, I'm not personally involved in that, but we do have an interest in skills education and the delivery of those things, and apprenticeships as well.
And when SRUC or the previous body, SAC, were closing farms, closing campuses. Are any of you then in supporting that, opposing it, taking neutral positions because they think, this is a body that is,
I think
autonomous?
You'll find that certainly when Auchencrieff and Craveston were going through changes, and now with Elmwood, there is significant concern, particularly within those locations in Ayrshire and up in Aberdeenshire and all the rest of it, about those changes. And very much at a local level, there's been some significant discontent from our members about some of the significant changes that they've seen. That, I think, is then been translated to ourselves as in terms of our thinking, and we've made it very clear to government on several occasions that we can't afford to, as an industry, to step back and allow any sort of rundown without proper investment and funding going forward for, as I said earlier on, for the proper effective functioning of not only SRUC but the other research institutes as well, so that actually they enable Scottish agriculture to deliver what it's being asked to deliver. I mean, it would be foolhardy for us to, as an organisation, to say, well, that's just the education system or the research sector. That doesn't matter to us. It absolutely does matter to us. And on any platform anywhere, we will be arguing with government or otherwise to say, you've got to ensure that not only the funding is in place and the investment is in place, whether it's through commercial interests or public sector, but also that the education system is prioritised in that respect, and that the research is appropriate, applicable, and ultimately practical in terms of its delivery.
And just before I go to Miles Briggs, Professor Powell, you heard Mr Van Herk's point, and I thought the analogy was, I liked it anyway as a football fan, I have to say. How do you respond to that? Because, I mean, you've gone through a vote of no confidence in you and the senior leadership team. You lost that. But nothing changes. That's the response coming from your staff, knowing that you and others are on this committee today. What will the difference be?
Could you elaborate on that question, Convener?
Well, in terms of, is it Wayne Powell and the senior management's way, and if there's dissent from the staff, that's unfortunate, but you're going to get that? Or do you reflect on the fact that there are community organisations, some in the gallery today, who are very against the plans that you brought forward or have taken forward as principal? There are staff raising concerns. We know there are student concerns. There are wider industry concerns, which I articulated at the start. How do you respond to them? Do you say you hear them, but nothing changes? Or what's the future for Wayne Powell? What's the long-term future for you as principal, given that staff speaking to their representatives coming to this committee think that tomorrow nothing will change and it'll all go back to normal?
I think that... First of all, I do listen. And I think the second thing is that, Convener, difficult decisions are sometimes unpopular. That doesn't make them wrong. But I do fundamentally believe in listening. I do listen and take on board people's views. Regarding some of the points that were raised as well, we have 2 Fife farmers on our board, so we do have local understanding of what is going on, and I certainly subscribe to the view of engaging with local communities and will continue to do so. But we also have to be in a position where we sustain SRUC going forward and ensure its financial sustainability, but also true to the mission that we started in 2012 when the merger took place.
Okay, Miles Briggs.
Thank you, Convener. Good morning to the panel. I wanted to ask a couple of questions. Firstly, in relation to external support which has been provided by the Scottish Funding Council, and if you could outline what that has looked like to take forward some of the changes. I'll maybe bring yourself in, Professor Powell.
We have a very productive relationship with the Funding Council, and we've received excellent support from the Funding Council in terms of financial support, in terms of a £5 million advance, and also in terms of support for repayments of transaction loans. So we've received very good support from the Funding Council. We also have had support from the Funding Council in being able to utilise our student numbers to support new vet entrants into our new vet school. And I think going forward from yesterday's budget, we will continue to engage with the Funding Council on supporting SIUC, including for capital investment and further investment in terms of supporting our student numbers.
And looking specifically at the vision which you would have, and this is cross-sector, where are plans being developed around what will be needed in our rural communities, around workforce planning, and what does that look like? And I'll maybe bring you in and then yourself, Mr Hall, on that, because it feels like there's a bit of a disconnect between the skills we have shortages in and where the college is focused on meeting that skills gap at this moment in time. And I just wondered what you were doing yourselves to try to bridge that, given what's being often raised in Parliament around these key sector skill shortages we have across the country at the minute.
I think the following on from the Withers review and following on from the report that came out in terms of agile skills for a changing economy, we are very much involved in engagement with industry and business to understand what the needs are going forward and ensuring that our courses tailor that. We've also engaged in terms of supporting work-based learning so that we provide opportunities for students to undertake the equivalent of an apprenticeship. Also in terms of development of micro-credentials to support what business needs are. And also I'm involved in chairing interface to ensure that we have a good understanding of the connection of businesses into colleges and universities more generally.
Specifically, could you outline around the shortages around farriers across the country at the minute, where the college have taken forward any work on that? Because it's a really important issue. It's been raised with me. I chair cross-party group on horse racing and bloodstock industries here in the Parliament, and that has become a really important issue. Currently there's 185 registered farriers across the country. Only 6 training apprenticeships are currently in place. So I wondered, that's quite an obvious crisis building, what response the college has put to that.
The college response to what? I'm sorry, I'm having difficulty in hearing.
In delivering farrier training, to deliver farrier training opportunities.
I think the barriers to the training opportunities are often
farriers. Shoeing horses.
Yeah, we would love to be able to support the development of farriers, and we have the facilities and infrastructure to do that at Oatbridge. It's the funding that we need to be able to develop that going forward, and I'd be happy to pick that up with you separately, but also it's an area that one of our colleagues is actively engaged in.
Because at present there's nowhere in Scotland accredited to run that course. I would have thought yourselves years ago would have been doing work to become that, and the great opportunity and the great crisis which is building in equine for health should be a priority. Scottish Government and yourselves should be making that a priority, and there's been very little progress. I've been writing, along with the cross-party group, a number of letters around this, and there doesn't seem to be that leadership, which is concerning, because I think for most of us sitting on this committee, we look at SRUC to be doing that work for our rural and agricultural communities, and it doesn't seem to be progressing at any pace. Would you take on board that criticism? Because
I'm very happy to pick that up and take that on board, and I'm very happy to pick that up with you personally and ensure that we follow that up.
And I mentioned vision, because I think that should be a key part of what you're doing, scoping that opportunity and the jobs of tomorrow for our rural communities as well. What is your vision then for the organisation?
My vision, not my vision, I think SIUC's vision is to be a model for the delivery of tertiary education to support Scotland's rural economy that brings together innovation, skills and enterprise to support the rural economy, which is critical for Scotland. I think, and to maximise the full potential of Scotland's natural capital, which underpins most of Scotland's iconic industries, including food, agriculture, aquaculture and other areas as well. But we will not do that in isolation. We'll be doing it through collaboration.
And on the issue of inclusion, because we've received a number of communications specifically around learners and where they have been relying on local provision, those who cannot travel independently and benefiting from that supported local infrastructure. Is that part of your vision, or moving online for these individuals is the offering you would put forward? Because I think there's a lot of concern over what that will actually mean in the future. An ability for people, you know, all of us have visited different institutions as members of this committee. Often travel is one of the key barriers which will stop someone accessing a course.
Yeah, we see that in terms of the importance of being able to provide a local provision is really important. And we will continue to do that. I think one of the areas that we are interested in exploring is the fact that we have 24 consultancy offices across Scotland. How well can we adapt that to provide local provision in a manner which is quite innovative going forward? So yes, it is an issue, but we also need to be able to address what the needs of those future learners are and the needs of industry and the economy to support the skills agenda.
Mm-hmm. Thanks for that. Mr Hall, I'll bring you in. What's your impression of skills planning, given what I've outlined specifically around farriers, but the broader industry needs and SRUC meeting or not meeting those?
I'm not going to single out SRUC on this because I think it's a bigger issue. I think skills planning, auditing, understanding what we require for not only the agricultural sector but the wider rural economy, the land-based sectors, which is becoming more and more diverse in nature. As we diversify different income streams and all the rest of it, I think there's an absolute need for a better understanding and insight of what the skills and capabilities we will need in order to drive those businesses forward. There's absolutely no doubt about that, and NFU Scotland would be wanting to play a full part in that. I think it's probably a bigger question, and it's a question relevant to this committee in the sense that, you know, where does that journey begin in many ways in terms of things like the STEM subjects at school level in the curriculum? How do we create, I know it's a cliche, that pipeline of attracting and enabling younger people to come into not only the agricultural sector, as I say, but into the wider rural economy and the different businesses that make up rural Scotland these days. So I think there's a bigger question. I think there's a bigger task than just a review of where SRUC are and where SRUC can deliver on that. Clearly, SRUC will have a major part to play in the delivery side of that, but understanding what the demand is and what the needs are of the industry in the sector, I think is the first port of call. So that's probably a piece of work that's way overdue.
And do you think the Scottish Government understand that and are actually taking forward any work in that space? Or is there a disconnect? And we are hearing consistently about shortages across all sectors, which I think is a real concern for the economy, yes, but also why institutions aren't managing. And the credit system is often being put forward by the college sector as the reason for not being able to have more flexibility to put on additional courses, for example. But I don't see who then, you know, is leading that work to make sure that these shortages over a period of time are actually filled.
I don't see, from my perspective, a particular issue with Scottish Government, because I think Scottish Government have identified that one of the big challenges that the agricultural industry has got is about how you attract, retain and provide career pathways within agriculture. There are initiatives that the Scottish Government drive, things like something called FONE, F-O-N-E, which is farming opportunities for new entrants and other things like that. And the apprenticeship work and all that debate about how do you make agriculture an attractive career option for younger people. And that's partly a responsibility for ourselves. I mean, how do we attract individuals to want to be not just farmers, but actually to have a career within all those allied industries and trades and professions that are so important to making sure that agriculture in Scotland is professional and can deliver on what it's being asked to do, as I've said a number of times this morning. So I think that's really important. Understanding where we are today is going to be important. Some of the supply issues are not necessarily the gift of NFUS or SRUC or indeed Scottish Government or the Scottish Parliament. Some of the supply challenges we've faced in recent years are actually as a consequence of things like Brexit, in terms of the movement of people and the able and willingness of seasonal workers, permanent workers and so on. So that's a much bigger debate to be had. But nevertheless, we need those people to be skilled, competent, able and willing. So that is a role for a government in any sense to make sure that we can provide those opportunities.
Thank you. Does anyone else on the panel want to come in on any of those questions or points?
I think the only additional point that I would want to make is that educational institutions should also take into account educational requirement. I mean, there obviously is a huge need for both colleges and universities to provide students who are ready for the workplace. But there also has to be an adequate spread of education provision for those who want to learn something. And it shouldn't just be a factor which is driven by industry. And I think, and that probably leads to taking a broader issue around marketisation and, the loss of potentially courses. I'm not just saying SRUC, but across education in its entirety, which is because it doesn't seem to feed into workplaces or industry that those subject matters are no longer viable and then they're lost. So I think, as I said, it's not an SRUC specific thing, but I think there needs to be a real understanding and a review of why universities and colleges are there, and it's to educate people. It's not just for work, but it's to educate them in their ongoing life and perhaps interests that they may have, as opposed to just for work purposes.
Yeah, no, thanks for that, and we very much heard that last night at the EIS Fellow event here in Parliament. So grateful for your input to that as well. Thanks, Convener.
Thank you. Just a couple of things before we finish up. Professor Powell, we heard earlier about an email that you'd sent saying that you have to make £5 million in staffing cuts. Is that correct?
What is that, sorry?
You'd sent an email to all staff about £5 million of staffing cuts. Is that correct? I'll go back to Mr Van Herk then. I think it was...
I believe last year there was an email sent and there's I believe either every month or every 2 months there's like principal update, I believe they're called. And one of the things mentioned in there that there had to be £5 million being saved in staff costs. So that's either not renewing positions or like limiting recruits. And I believe the message was something along the lines of the budget for staffing was, I believe, 65 million and had become 50 million. I believe that was the line. Yeah.
Had become or had to become?
No, it had to be reduced by 5 million,
Yeah.
so it had therefore to become 60 million. So 65 to 60, I believe. Or it was, I believe in that region. Yeah.
Professor Powell?
In terms of a financial recovery plan, it is clear that we need to reduce our staff costs as a proportion of our total income. And I think that email, I'm afraid I don't have that in front of me, Convener. I'm happy to come back to you on that, but suspect that was to do with how is to deliver on our financial recovery plan, which is reducing our staff costs. Largely, we achieved that through not replacing staff that had left the organisation.
But the 5 million figure is correct.
Pardon?
The 5 million figure, you'll remember how much you have to save.
We had to save in terms of our financial recovery plan. We have to save the financial recovery plan was set to save in excess of 5 million, but that would going to be over a number of years.
But if you were emailing all staff and you had a figure, you'll be able to recall that. Was it 5 million, about 5 million? Does that sound right? I mean, this was going to result in your organisation employing fewer people to the tune of a cost of £5 million.
I'd like to understand when that email was sent.
OK, but, I mean, have there been significant staffing reductions of the level, or projected to be of the level in the future, of around £5 million?
So our staff reduction, currently the staff reduction that we've been implementing during the financial recovery plan have reduced staff numbers by between 70 and 80 numbers of staff. So that would represent about £4 to £5 million in terms of reduction in staff costs. Largely those would have been achieved through non-replacement of staff leaving the organisation and not filling those replacement posts.
So my question then is this the end of the reductions in staffing in terms of a recruitment freeze or looking for people to leave the organisation, not replacing them, etc.?
We're doing our best, and during the past 6 years, we've not made any compulsory redundancies at SRUC, and will endeavour to continue with that. But in light of the conversations you're hearing this morning in terms of pay settlements and other pressures on the system, I can't provide guarantees on what staff reductions would look like. Our goal is to maintain the staff complement that we have, but of course we're under a lot of pressure in terms of achieving financial sustainability.
Mm-hmm. We've heard a lot of unhappiness from unions representing staff about pay and conditions. Are you happy with your own salary and conditions?
My salary is $214,000.
And that's why I was asking if you're happy with it.
My salary is set by my board on the recommendation of the RNA committee. It is for the role. And I have not sought an increase in my salary or received any increases other than the percentage increases that other staff have received.
But you haven't received increases. But I'm still asking, are you happy with it? Is it a generous salary? Is it one you think should be higher, it's exactly right, or it should be lower?
I think this is a generous salary. I'm aware of the optics of this.
So it's too high?
I didn't say that.
You said it's generous and you're aware of the optics. So what did you mean by those?
I think
very specific words you chose here.
My salary is £214,000 per annum. It is set by the board. I'm privileged to be leading an organisation of national significance, and the level of salary is set by my board.
Okay. Finally, Mr Van Herk first, and maybe Mr Ross, but Mr Van Herk, so it was your question was what happens tomorrow after a session today, and we'll go into private session to discuss the evidence we've received today. But what do you think your members would like to see happening tomorrow and into the future after a session today, bringing this to Parliament, largely because of concerns that have been in the public domain from community groups, from local MSPs and others who have fed it into the committee, and from staff and students, current and former? What do you think needs to happen going forward after this session? Well,
I think certainly having these sessions are very good, and I think given the financial situation that we're in, I hope there may be another of these meetings taking place at some point. I can't really speculate on outcomes but it's not that our membership have made particular demands. It was more an open question that they asked me because, I think our membership is quite happy with our union, but again, that's the big question they ask, like what can you do to create change, because we're I would say Unison is quite a good union, particularly in Scotland-wide. We're quite strong, but again, we're also limited to what we can achieve in terms of management in that sense. So. Yeah, I don't really know if I can give a better answer than that.
No, I think you've articulated that well. Thank you. Mr Ross.
Yeah, I suppose our membership, first and foremost, are looking to try and draw a line under any form of kind of pay and grading and pay aspects that sit outstanding at SRUC, and that would then allow them to focus probably better on what they're there to do in their highly skilled roles as educators. And I think coming out of this as well is also to ensure that there is that equilibrium of further education provision across each of the campuses, especially a focal point on those campuses which have seen an erosion of investment and support. So I think that would be the key factors that the EIS members would be expecting. They only seek parity with their colleagues across the higher education sector, and the opportunity to progress their own careers and to the betterment of their students.
Mr Hall, NFU Scotland looking to continue the close working and development of future farmers, farm workers, crofters going forward?
Absolutely. Critical to the longevity of the Scottish agricultural industry is having that, as I said a number of times, not only the pipeline of skilled and able individuals, but also that applied research and the advisory services that SRUC and others provide.
And Professor Powell, any final comments before we close the meeting about what we've discussed today and the future?
Thank you, Convener. I will come back in writing in response to many of the points that have been raised. In particular, your opening comment regarding next generation agriculture students, I'll come back to you specifically and with an update on the proposed visit. On the point on FE across all campuses, that already exists. And just one further point, in terms of new entrants, we did initiate a new entrance into our dairy farming in south of Scotland, and that was welcomed and launched by the Minister for Agriculture. Thank you.
Just on that, I hope you might welcome old entrants, because I'm looking for a job in a few months' time and I might go back to my former life milking cows. You never know. Can I thank you all very much for your time today, for your evidence, both written in advance and your answers to questions today. It's much appreciated by the committee, and I will now suspend the meeting to allow the committee to move into private session to consider our final agenda item. Thank you.